The golden glow of the chandelier reflected off the polished marble floors of Mark Ivanov's Moscow penthouse, casting tiny prisms across the grand hall. Outside, snow swirled in thick flakes, blanketing the city in a cold, silent beauty that contrasted sharply with the warmth and opulence inside. Mark, tall and impeccably dressed in a tailored dark suit, sipped from a crystal glass of Dom Perignon, his gaze fixed on the framed photographs lining the walls. Pictures of him with smiling politicians, luxury cars, and yachts adorned every corner. But one photograph still caught his attention, a picture of Lisa, his ex-wife, taken 5 years ago, smiling nervously at a family gathering. Tonight she would be here. He had sent her an invitation under the guise of a social gala, a celebration of his latest business venture in real estate. But Mark's real intentions were far less innocent. He wanted to show her and the entire high society of Moscow how much she had fallen. She had struggled after their divorce, living in a modest apartment in the outskirts of the city, working 2 jobs just to make ends meet. She would be humiliated, a faded shadow among Moscow's elite, he thought, a cruel smirk curling his lips. He turned to his friend Dmitri, who was adjusting his cufflinks nearby. "She'll come," Mark said, voice low and confident. "She always does. And tonight everyone will see the truth." Meanwhile, in a small, cluttered apartment in the historic Arbat district, Lisa sorted through her wardrobe. Her apartment smelled faintly of tea and old books, a stark contrast to Mark's palace. She had hesitated when she received the invitation, her fingers trembling over the embossed card. The thought of facing Mark surrounded by his wealth and power filled her with anxiety, but also a strange sense of resolve. "I'll go," she whispered to herself, adjusting the hem of her modest dress. Not to prove anything to him, but to prove it to myself. Outside, the city hummed with life. Taxis honked, people hurried along the icy sidewalks, and the faint smell of roasted chestnuts from street vendors mingled with the crisp winter air. Lisa took a deep breath, tucked her auburn hair behind her ear, and stepped into her winter coat. She did not yet know that the night would bring a twist no one could have expected, but for the first time in years, she felt a flicker of courage. Inside the penthouse, Mark's eyes gleamed as he imagined the scene. Lisa walking in alone, every eye on her, a living testament to failure. But fate, as always, had a habit of rewriting even the most carefully laid plans. If you want, I can expand scene 2 in Russia next, showing Lisa's dramatic entrance with the multimillionaire, and the tension building in the Moscow gala. Do you want me to do that? Scene 2. The arrival, expanded. Russia, 400 words. The heavy doors of Mark Ivanov's penthouse swung open, admitting a gust of the bitter Moscow winter. Outside, the streets glistened with freshly fallen snow, and the city's lights reflected off the icy pavement, casting an almost magical glow. Inside, the warm opulence of the penthouse contrasted sharply with the cold outside. Crystal chandeliers sparkled overhead, their light bouncing off polished marble and gold-trimmed walls, while waiters in crisp uniforms moved gracefully among the guests, offering champagne and hors d'oeuvres. Mark adjusted his cufflinks, a smug smile spreading across his face. He had spotted her on the invitation list weeks ago, and now he waited with a cruel anticipation. Tonight, he thought, everyone would see her, the woman who had once shared his life, now alone and diminished, stepping into a world far beyond her reach. The first notes of a string quartet began, soft and elegant, filling the hall with a refined melody, and then the doors opened again. Lisa appeared, not alone but with a man whose presence seemed to command the room. Tall, sharply dressed in a tailored charcoal suit, with an air of effortless confidence, he moved as if the world naturally cleared a path for him. His hand rested lightly on Lisa's arm, guiding her with quiet authority. Guests turned their heads, murmurs spreading like wildfire. Mark's smile faltered. His eyes narrowed. "Who?" he muttered under his breath, almost not believing what he saw. Lisa walked slowly, deliberately, her modest dress simple but elegant, accentuating a newfound poise. She met Mark's gaze briefly, her eyes steady and unflinching, as if to say, "I am not the same person you think I am." The man at her side, Alex, exuded wealth and power, but also respect. He didn't need to boast. His confidence spoke for itself. Whispers rippled through the room. "Is that Lisa Ivanova? And that man, he's a billionaire. Mark looks uncomfortable." Mark forced a laugh, trying to reclaim his composure, but it rang hollow. He had expected vulnerability, embarrassment, shame, but Lisa radiated calm and elegance. Guests began to subtly shift their attention, drawn to her quiet magnetism. Lisa's lips curved into a small, polite smile. She didn't need to speak yet. Her entrance, supported by Alex's commanding presence, said enough. She was no longer the woman he could humiliate at will. She had arrived not as a victim, but as someone who had transformed her life, and the room felt it instantly. Mark's plans were unraveling in real time, snow melting at his feet as the winds of change swept through the gala. If you want, I can expand scene 3 next, where the confrontation between Lisa and Mark happens, full of tension, sharp dialogue, and social humiliation, keeping it cinematic and Russian in flavor. Do you want me to do that? Scene 3. The confrontation. Expanded. Russia, 400 words. Mark Ivanov's smile had long since disappeared. He stood near the bar, his hand tightening around a crystal glass of cognac, the amber liquid trembling slightly as he tried to steady his composure. The warmth of the Moscow penthouse, the chatter of wealthy guests, and the soft strains of the string quartet all seemed to fade into the background as his gaze locked onto Lisa. She was moving through the room, with Alex at her side, a subtle aura of confidence surrounding them that Mark had not anticipated. He forced a casual tone, raising his glass. "Lisa," he called, his voice sharper than intended, carrying across the room. "I didn't expect company." Lisa paused mid-step, her head tilting slightly, eyes glinting with calm amusement. She didn't need to rush. The room had already noticed the shift. Guests whispered among themselves, glancing between Mark's tightening jaw and Lisa's serene composure. "This is Alex," she said smoothly, gesturing toward the man beside her. His posture was relaxed, but every inch of him radiated wealth, influence, and self-assurance. Well, let's just say he's the reason I'm smiling tonight." A ripple ran through the crowd. Conversations faltered mid-sentence. Mark felt a flush rising to his cheeks. His carefully laid plan to humiliate her was crumbling. The woman who had once seemed fragile, dependent, and overshadowed, was now walking through his world, like a queen reclaiming her court. "I didn't know," Mark started, but his words faltered. Alex's calm gaze met his, and it was clear. This man would not be intimidated by Mark's reputation or wealth. Lisa didn't need to say more. Her confidence paired with Alex's quiet power said everything. Guests began to subtly side with Lisa, offering smiles, polite nods, and whispers of admiration. Mark could feel their judgment. The unspoken verdict. The ex-wife he had thought would be humiliated was thriving. Radiant, untouchable, Lisa's lips curved into a small, almost imperceptible smile. She leaned slightly toward Alex, as if sharing a private joke, a moment of intimacy that Mark could neither penetrate nor control. The sting of envy cut deeper than any words could. Mark raised his glass in a forced toast, trying to reclaim dignity, but the effort rang hollow. Lisa's eyes met his briefly, not with anger, but with a calm strength that made his ego shrink. He realized, with an almost painful clarity, that humiliation was no longer his domain. The night, and perhaps fate itself, had rewritten the rules. If you want, I can expand scene 4 next, showing Lisa and Alex's triumph, Mark's realization, and a dramatic, cinematic closing of the story. This one can really feel like the climax of a Russian social drama. Do you want me to do that? Scene 4, the exit, expanded, Russia, 400 words. The night had stretched long over Moscow, the city lights twinkling like distant stars beyond the floor-to-ceiling windows of Mark Ivanov's penthouse. The gala, meant to showcase his power and social dominance, had transformed into an unforeseen spectacle, one that left Mark isolated amidst the glittering crowd. Lisa and Alex moved through the room together, laughing softly at some shared joke, their presence magnetic. Guests parted subtly, offering smiles and polite bows, their admiration quiet but unmistakable. Each step Lisa took radiated confidence. Each glance she cast was a statement that she no longer belonged to Mark's shadow. Mark lingered near the bar, swirling his cognac with a mechanical precision. He watched Lisa's every move, a bitter taste of defeat settling in his mouth. All night he had imagined her arrival as a moment to flaunt his superiority, to see her shrink in embarrassment under the weight of his wealth. Instead, the opposite had happened. She was luminous, powerful in her poise, and most damning of all, entirely untouchable. Across the room, Alex offered his arm again, guiding Lisa through a conversation with influential business leaders. Their laughter, soft but genuine, drew curious glances from the elite of Moscow's social scene. Mark recognized with a pang of envy that it wasn't the money that defined her newfound presence, it was her confidence, her grace, and the company she kept. A few guests approached Mark politely, subtly offering congratulations for hosting, but he could feel the tension in their eyes, the unspoken awareness that Lisa had claimed the evening. The realization struck him with a bitter clarity. Power isn't measured in possessions alone. It is measured in presence, in influence, in self-assurance. Lisa's eyes briefly met Mark's across the room. She gave a small courteous nod, a gesture of closure rather than confrontation. In that instant, Mark understood that she didn't need to humiliate him. He had already been undone by his own pride and assumptions. As the last of the string, quartet's notes faded and guests began to drift toward their luxury, cars and awaiting chauffeurs. Lisa and Alex walked toward the grand doors, their silhouettes framed by the glow of Moscow's winter night. The cold wind brushed against her face, crisp and invigorating, a symbol of the new life she was stepping into. Mark remained by the bar, the warmth of the penthouse unable to thaw the chill of regret. He had invited her to his world to assert dominance, but she had arrived with something far stronger than wealth. She had arrived with dignity, power, and the certainty that she was finally free. And with that, Lisa vanished into the night, leaving Mark alone with the echoes of his own defeat. If you want, I can also combine all 4 scenes into a single, polished short story in cinematic Russian style, ready to read like a dramatic novella or a screenplay. It would feel seamless,